everybody. It's your friendly real estate agent, Melissa Hunter, and I am here with Brian Nomi. He's a wonderful attorney here in Ventura County. I wanted to bring to you some really good information about tenant things, landlord conversation topics that have been coming up lately with clients that are looking to invest, also with renters. So I thought it would be great and beneficial to bring Brian Nomi, a local attorney, to talk with us about some serious questions that have been asked to me that I think Brian would actually be the better resource for these questions. Brian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. My name is Brian Nomi. I'm an attorney. I'm based in Camarillo. I live and work in Camarillo, California. My main field is landlord and tenant. I deal with landlord and tenant almost all day long. Um, I also do bankruptcy and I do a few other things, but landlord tenant is what keeps me the busiest. And I'm also one of the few attorneys in the world who answers the phone. So I'm happy to take phone calls or talk to people. So with that, I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Great. Well, I only want to take about 15 minutes of everybody's time because I know time is valuable and really get down to the specific questions that I've been asked and also questions that most people in the area would like to know more about based on what I've been hearing out there on the streets.
Okay.
so, okay, so first question I have for you, Brian, is what are the major landlord tenant changes you have seen in our county?
There's a lot of ways to answer that. I'll say that since, well, over the last 2 years, we had, the COVID pandemic that started in March of 2020, which
Yes.
set off, strangely, it set off a real estate buying frenzy. I mean, I've never seen real estate prices jump the way that they did from March of 2020 until basically 3 or 4 months ago. So basically, middle of this year, 2022. So real estate prices have gone up, but in addition to that, rent has gone up probably even more steeply, I would say. The
Yes.
landlords are have been totally in control. Tenants are having a hard time finding anything, and rents are sky high. So, in
Mhm.
terms of our county, I would say that that's the change. Over the last month or two, I think there's been a change in that. I think that a lot of people are now not selling, and they're instead renting out properties. So there's become a greater availability of rentals on the rental market. So that's putting more competition with them. I think rents are definitely coming down a little bit. Not a
Most
lot, but a little
definitely.
bit. Yeah, and I think real estate prices, just the price of homes, is also going down a little bit. Um, that's just something that's happened in the last 2 months. Big changes tend to take months to years in the real estate market, but that's I think we're at the I think we passed the peak for both you know selling prices and rent prices in Ventura County. So how long will the downturn go? Who knows? But that's what I see.
Yeah, that's that these are all good points. And with all the changes that we've gone through with these last couple of years, the moratorium, there's been changes with the county, laws and rules and how you can treat a tenant, also how you can, rent to a tenant and all of that good stuff. There's been so many changes over the last couple years. It leads me to my next question. Um, are there landlords that keep a retainer for legal services just in case with you, just because of all the changes that have been made with the moratorium and
You know,
previous years?
That's an interesting question, and the answer is no. I don't know. There's very few attorneys that just keep retainers just to
Okay.
be available. Usually, what I do is if someone asks me to do some work, I charge them for my work. I don't charge people just to be available to talk to them. I'm available to talk anytime. I answer my own phone all day long, and
Hmm.
I don't know any attorney. I mean, it's very rare for any attorney in any field to just take a retainer up front just to be their attorney without having to do work. That's not the normal way that things work. I will say that there have been gigantic changes in landlord tenant law since January of 2020. This was
Okay. Yes.
pre-COVID, like by 3 months. There was
Yes.
some very big changes, and people are always welcome to call me or watch some other videos or just to get educated about what those changes are. Uh, I'll go over it briefly, like in 60 seconds. So, you know, for a long time, renters would were only entitled to 30 days notice. If you wanted to
Mhm.
terminate a tenant, you gave them 30 days notice. Like 12 or 13 years ago, that increased to 60 days notice if the tenant has been there for more than 1 year.
Yes.
If the tenant doesn't pay rent, you can give a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. And if the tenant doesn't pay rent, you can start the eviction action after 3 days. Um, the big change in 2020 is that for multi-unit properties, there are rent caps and just cause restrictions, which I could go into in great detail. But if you're a real estate agent, you may want to check the forms. There's a California Association of Realtor form called the RCJC, Rent Cap Just Cause. Study that form.
Okay.
That'll educate you quite a bit. But if it's a multi-unit property, you're limited to the statewide rent increase, which is 5% plus cost of inflation. This year it's 9%, and you can only terminate if you have certain specific reasons, such as you want to sell the property, you want to do a substantial renovation, uh, you're going to be having a family member move into the property. Those are reasons that you can give a 60-day notice. COVID really threw a wrench into these. So for the last 2 years, that's a big part of what I've been dealing with. But COVID is basically over in terms of the rental, landlord-tenant relationship. There's no more rent relief that's being paid. There's no more eviction moratoriums, at least in most of California. City of Los Angeles, different story. But those are the main things that you need to know about from 2020 onward. Is that there is a statewide rent cap just cause law. That rent cap just cause generally is not applicable to individually owned single family homes and condos. So if you have mom and pop or just individuals who own a condo or a single family house and they do the lease the right way, which a lot of people are not doing their leases the right way, then you could be exempt from the rent cap just cause law. I'm sure you're familiar with the CAR form residential lease agreement. That's a really
Yes.
good form. It comes out with all sorts of other things, mold addendum, bed bug addendum, rent cap just cause addendum. So make sure that that's done correctly. A lot of people go to Staples or they find a lease form online and they fill it out and they do it wrong. So that's the biggest problem that I see for owners, especially the mom and pop owners who are renting out property by themselves. Professional property managers, professional real estate agents generally get the lease done right because they're using the correct forms, the CAR forms usually. But that's something for people to be aware of is that, you know, make sure you're aware of the January 2020 rent cap just cause law. I mean, I could go into that for the next hour. I'm not going to. I just gave you the 1 minute version, not the full 60-minute version. But that's what people need to know about.
That's great. No, that's great news. I mean, I know that, from city to city, they put different things in place.
Yes,
Oxnard versus Ventura versus
yes.
Camarillo, just in general, are very different from, each other. And I've
Oxnard is
heard
the
that.
outlier on that. Oxnard has its own specific rent cap and just cause eviction controls, which is way more restrictive. So that's only City of Oxnard, which not every house with an Oxnard address is in the City of Oxnard. But if you're in the City of Oxnard, that raises a whole bunch of other issues. The only other city is Ventura, which has just a very very minor restriction. Otherwise, most of Ventura County just follows statewide law, which is I have no problem with the statewide law. It's pretty easy to work with. City of Oxnard is a real pain in the butt. I'll just give you the punchline on that up front, which is if
Yes.
you want to kick someone out in the City of Oxnard, you can still kick them out for non-payment of rent. But if you just want to kick them out because you want to remodel or you want to have a family member move in, you generally will have to pay 2 months rent or $5,000, whichever is more, up front to the tenant before at the time that you give them the 60-day notice. That's the main thing that's
Wow.
driving landlords crazy in the City of Oxnard.
Now, quick question on that, Brian.
Yeah.
Now, when you say 60-day notice and provide 2 months rent or 5,000, whatever
Hmm.
is greater,
Right.
the question is, would that apply to a tenant that has been living in the property for over a year?
No, that applies to any tenant that's been living in the property for more than 30 days.
Oh, okay.
See how bad that is?
So any tenant that's lived in the property for more than 30 days,
In
if they're
Oxnard.
given a 60-day notice, would
Yes.
have to be paid to leave that
Yes.
property.
Yes. Yes. That's the way the law reads. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
I definitely want to take a closer look on that, with that new, I guess they would call it an ordinance, right?
Yeah,
The city
yeah. It
ordinance.
only went into effect June 4th of this year, and people are still struggling with it. I've only had like one case so far that actually went to court over the new ordinance. And anyway, it's something that everyone's still learning about right now. But
Yeah,
it's
I definitely think that your services would be very beneficial to any landlords that have a plan to ask somebody to leave and give a 60-day
yeah,
notice for sure in the city of Oxnard, especially.
especially yeah, yeah. I can
Mhm.
tell you most of the landlords that do it themselves do it wrong. It's just the 10 years ago or 5 years ago, maybe you could do it right yourself if you just had some basic knowledge. Nowadays, it's gotten very complicated. Even for me, it's kind of complicated. And I'm doing this 10 hours a day, every single day. And, if you're just a landlord, you do this once a year and you walk over to Staples and get your notice or get your notice from like legalzoom.com or something like that, there's a very good chance you're going to do it wrong because I see people do it wrong all the time. So be aware that, I answer the phone. I give consults for free all the time to landlords only. I only work for landlords. That's my business is landlords.
Yes,
Give a call to someone who knows what they're doing, get it done right. Because generally I do these things for free. So,
that's
that's
great.
kind of my lost leader. I mean, the landlord gets me to do the notice for free, and then eventually I'll get the eviction case. That's how my business generally works.
Hmm. That's great, Brian. Well, we'll definitely have your contact information at the end of this podcast so that people can reach you directly. One last question that I have for you before we go on to our contact information is what should a landlord do if they have a tenant with back pay due from the moratorium at this point, or vice versa? What should a tenant do in this circumstance? I know that there are quite a few people that are in that predicament. And I am pretty sure on both ends it's pretty stressful and it's causing a little rift in a relationship between landlord and tenant. But what do these folks do at this point?
That's an interesting question because I'm not seeing that very much. I mean, we're like a couple days away from October 2022.
Yeah.
The rent relief program ended. There were no more applications that were being taken as of March 31st,
Yes.
2022. And so we're about 6 months into this where there's no more applications. Generally speaking, it takes 2 to 3 months for an application to be processed. So there's very, very few cases. I mean, I think I'm down to my last one where there's any rent relief that's even in the picture. But there are special rules that come into play if you want rent that was due during the eviction moratorium, which gets you back to October of last year. So if you have rent that's more than a year old, that would be problematic. I'm just not seeing that. I mean, if someone actually had that problem of a tenant who has not paid from before October of 2021, boy, I mean that I don't see it, but I could look that up. I mean, generally speaking, there are all kinds of ways for a landlord to kick someone out, and I would say
Yeah.
just go after the rent for this year instead of going after the rent from last year. You can only go back 12 months anyway. We're already at the 12-month point at this point. So yeah, I mean that was a highly relevant question in January or February of this year, but now it's nah, it's not a
Well, it
problem. I
sounds
mean,
like
everyone who's not been paying rent from 2021, I've already evicted them for the most part. I
mhm.
mean, maybe there's one or two small exceptions out there, but I don't think so. Um, yeah, you have to pay your rent now. There's no more COVID moratorium on rent payments. That's kind of the punchline of this particular question.
Well, and it also sounds like, in on the positive light of this, that if there is a tenant that is back, owed back rent, and the landlord hasn't done any legal, proceedings, then it probably likely won't happen, because we are so far from all of that, rent relief and all that good
Yeah,
stuff.
imagine that you're a landlord and you own a house and the tenant's living in your house and the tenant hasn't paid you a penny of rent for the last year. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do to that landlord is slap him and say, "What are you doing? Why didn't you call me a year ago?" You know, and then the second thing I'm going to do is let's make a plan to kick this tenant out. I mean, is that tenant going to pay all 12 months all at once? Probably not. Probably not. Um, you know, maybe we could work something out, but 90 to 95% of the time we're kicking those people out.
I think my takeaway from this conversation personally is that I'm going to do some reading on the new ordinance that Oxnard has, especially, and Ventura, because there's a light ordinance there as well. I will also reach out to all of my investors that have rental properties and make sure that they have these updates because these are very new updates. As you
Yeah.
had mentioned, October's ordinance just came into play this summer, so within the last couple months. So it's definitely worthy of a call.
Yeah.
And also, I want to encourage everybody that we're all getting back on track, and although these ordinances are very different than what we have seen in the past, I do think that these ordinances are designed to give the tenant a little bit more rights
Yeah.
as a renter. And if we are paying an average, if you watched my podcast last week, we're paying an average now of $3,200 to $3,500 for a single family residence, 3 bedroom, 2 bath as a rental, which means that these tenants are giving out, six K as a deposit, and also paying, a very hefty penny. So, nevertheless, I definitely want to give all of my investor clients a call, and also, reach out to anybody that would love to know more about these ordinances. And that leads me to you, Brian. How do people get a hold of you if they have any questions?
There's several ways to get a hold of me. My website is my name, briannomi.com, BRIANNOMI. So briannomi.com, you can check me out on my website. That has all my contact info. My email address is on there. My physical address in Camarillo is on there. But I will say that, like I said at the start, I'm one of the only attorneys in the world who answers his own phone. So I'll give out my phone number right now, which is 805 444 5960. So 444 5960. You can call me. I answer the phone 90% of the time. I answer it myself on the first ring, and I give advice right on the spot. Usually, I give 3, 4, or 5 minutes for free. That's it. That's how I get people the information that they need.
Thank you, Brian. I think that, it would be such a benefit for people to reach out to you if they have any questions.
Yeah,
My phone number, my contact number is 805-312-7627. You can also find me at waltersgrouprealestate.com. I'll have all of our contact information on this video cast if you need to get a hold of us. And we really, really appreciate you tuning in. I'll look forward to the next video podcast. And I hope everybody is having a successful day. Take care.
great. Thank you, Melissa.